It's time to upgrade my NAS, and the friends from Asustor made this possible. It's quite an insane thing that we're gonna do here, and it's slightly different what people might think while we're getting this NAS, because you're thinking you already have a NAS, these specs look very similar to that NAS, what's going on? Well, let's go. Do you know what else is going on? This sponsored segment.
Looking for a cheap way to license your Windows? Check out Whokeys through the links in the video description. Make sure to use the code TN20 to get a 30% off. Paste the license to the activation settings and you're all done. This license is for Windows 10, but you can upgrade it to Windows 11 for free. They also offer Microsoft Office 19 license. Use the same code TN20 to get a 30% off. Check out whokeys.com in the video description below.
So then I do want to say huge thanks for Asustor and then Seagate as well, who sent these things for me to make this video. Actually, the video initiative was from me. I reached out to them to see if they would like to make this video, and they were happy to do it. This is Asustor Lockerstor 6 Gen 2, so it's the newer version of this. And it basically has 6 drive bays and, listen to this, 4 NVMe slots. The reason I wanted to upgrade or get something now, which I think a lot of you guys might be in the same situation if you're running a smaller business or kind of medium-sized business where you need a lot of different people accessing the same file storage or the same kind of database at the same time. Which, as you remember, I thought that the TerraMaster DAS was gonna do it, whereas in here we can get 2 or more people use this at the same time, which is gonna be the key thing here then. Here's the bad boy, or good boy. Inside the box, we have the power cable, 2 Ethernet cables, and some screws for the SSDs or hard drives. Now, then one of the main important things that I wanted to change with the newest NAS was these 2 things. First of all, I want the 10 gigabit Ethernet. And if you know this device, you might be saying, wait a second, that doesn't have that. We'll talk about that in a minute. And secondly, I wanted this NAS to be quiet, because at the moment I am using this other Lockerstor 4 for my like main NAS here, and a lot of B-roll is stored there. And whenever my editor is editing there, I hear a lot of clicking and hard drives. They're going there because obviously, you know, it's NAS, it uses hard drives, and because we're all in the same room and I'm not able to put it somewhere else, I want this to be quiet. And you might be in the same situation. You want this NAS to be quiet, and that's where these SSDs come in. So basically, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Seagate Ironwolf Pro 125 SSDs. Here's the thing about these drives. Usual drives have the terabyte written spec around 600. Samsung drives, for example, 980 Pro NVMe drives, or the normal, you know, like consumer SSDs, 2.5-inch SSDs, most of them have 600 terabytes written spec for the next 5 years, which roughly equates to around 30% of the drive can be rewritten every single day for the next 5 years, which most people is okay. But if you're doing media production, for example, or you're running a NAS or something like that, you might be actually writing much more than that. And these drives are rated at 1,750 terabytes written for this 960 gigabyte model, which means that 958 gigabytes can be rewritten every single day, which is basically exactly the same storage as this drive. So all of this drive can be filled and emptied every single day for the next 5 years, and it's completely fine within the spec. Now, this is absolutely crazy spec. This spec is basically 3 times more than what you usually see on a normal 1 terabyte SSD in the market. And that's why we're using these for NAS, and that's why these are NAS rated as well. So whenever you get like NAS products, Seagate products are like the highest quality in there. I'm gonna leave these in the description below as well. They are little SSDs like that we're gonna be putting inside these 6 bays, and that's gonna run completely silent. So when these are in operation, there is no noise apart from that little fan in the back, and there's a little power supply in the back there as well. And then we also have 2 NVMe drives, and these are Gen 4 NVMe drives, and we're going to be using these for caching on these as well, because remember, there's 4 NVMe slots on this motherboard, and we're going to occupy 2 of them. And you might be saying, why not 4? we're going to talk about in a moment where we're going to start to occupy these. But basically, these Gen 4 NVMEs have much faster random read and write speeds, which means that it doesn't have to always go and find it from these SATA SSDs that have a maximum sequential read and write speeds up to like 600 megabytes per second theoretically, whereas these are more like 5,000 megabytes per second read speed and 2.5 gigabytes per second write speed. Okay, before we open up the NAS, well, let's have a look at a little bit of the outside of the NAS. Obviously, we have a power on button on the top left over there. Then we have a few arrow buttons and buttons to configure the menu inside the Asustor NAS. And then we have another USB button in the front there that's 10 gigabit USB-C. And basically what you can do is plug in any of the hard drives or, you know, your SD cards, SD card readers, plug it in there. And when you press that button, you can assign it to just literally copy everything that's on the drive off somewhere in the NAS. So you can very easily like back up or basically copy the footage over if that's very important to you. We have an HDMI port to configure, you know, the actual OS or, you know, see what you're doing in there. Then we have two ports in here that are 2.5 gigabits in speed. We have another USB port that's 10 gigabits in speed, and then the power cord, and then obviously this tiny fan for the power supply there. Now, the reason I went with Asustor NAS is because I've tried the QNAP now. To be honest, I haven't tried Synology yet, so I can't speak for them. But compared to QNAP and this Asustor NAS is so much more kind of easy to understand. Everything inside there, it's much more simpler and like an Apple approach to some of the things. So even if you don't understand everything, for like your first NAS, I think Asustor is like very, very good for that. And Asustor usually hardware is like industry leading hardware when you want like the CPU and RAM and other things. They are like one of the best, or like you get the most hardware speed for your money. Even though I have one QNAP NAS and then one Asustor NAS, I'm using the Asustor NAS so much more, and I like kind of know the system. And when you have a system that you're already used to, especially if you're working as a professional, like a creator, it's so important. You know, when you're used to something, it's going to save you time when you upgrade and you don't need to like learn a new system, or like just because the system does something slightly differently. So now we see inside the NAS, okay? On this left or right side, depending which way you're looking, we have the motherboard that actually connects everything in there. Somewhere there is an actual CPU there as well. We'll see if you can see that on somewhere else. But I can see literally the power plug for this tiny motherboard is literally ATX power supply power plug. And what do we have here? This is 80 plus bronze power supply, so not very efficient. Could have been 80 plus gold or 80 plus platinum, but it is 250 watt max output what it can pull out. As you can see here, we have an NVMe slots or NVMe card in here. As you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 slots that you can plug in, and as you can see, they're very simple to plug in. You just put one in there, the quick release there, and your NVMe is installed. They don't have any heat sinks, but it's not a problem because they're not going to go that hot either. But basically, this is a PCIe slot there. It's a Gen 4 slot in there, and that's how it's connected. Now, I know that Asustor is going to release, I've talked to the guys there, Marco said that they're going to release a card in here that actually supports 10 gigabit Ethernet plus 2 NVMe slots. So basically, you're going to lose 2 NVMe slots, which I'm completely fine with, but you're going to get 2 10 gigabit ports in the back of this NAS, which is going to be really, really good, because if you look at in the back of the NAS, can you see there's like an expansion slot that you can screw out, and then boom, we're going to get extra 2 slots. So we can access this NAS through these 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports or the 10 gigabit ports, which is going to be absolutely amazing. If you want to pull these trays out, you just press the button in there, pull them out. Okay, if you look inside the NAS, in the end of there, you can see a massive SATA connector port that's connected into the motherboard on that side. If I tilt it slightly this way, you can see that gray heatsink over there, that's for the CPU. But basically, I was looking for the secondary RAM slot because there is a DDR4 RAM in there. It's 3200 speed and CL22. So as you can see over there, There's one RAM stick that you can see from the sides that's plugged in there. Let's do some screwing of SSDs. So installing the SSDs into the hard drive cages is pretty simple. If you turn the hard drives upside down, you can see that there is 4 screw holes here that say 2.5 inch there as well. And then if you take your 2.5 inch SSD and then just line them up in there like that, then screw them in. Bear in mind, make sure you use the right screws for these, because there's 2 separate threads inside the box. I already used the wrong ones at first, so I had to put them all back in the box. And then just rinse and repeat until you've done 6 drives. Now there are little safety kind of locks here as well. If you want to screw these sideways, so you can lock them, if you just turn these with a little screwdriver, you can turn them and then boom, everything is installed. Now I'm gonna set this NAS up and then we can do some speed tests in a moment. But if you want to know how to set up a NAS, I'd love to know if you want a tutorial. If you've never, for example, built a NAS before or used a NAS before, how to use it, how to set it up. If you want to know that, let me know in the comment section below if you want to see that tutorial. But let's set this up. So that's been a long time. It's been a few months and I've been going backwards and forwards with Asustor trying to figure out what was happening. By the way, I want to say that working with Asustor has been absolutely awesome. It's just because we've been waiting for some of the tests and labs and other things to go back, but my contact with Asus is like lovely to work with them. They're super helpful. So thanks Marco for helping me figure out what the heck is going on here. And as you can see, the SSDs that I put in so well are still in my hand over here. We will put them in there, but I've got to explain something. What the heck happened? So basically, after putting this up and I said, oh, I've got to set it up now, I actually started setting it up, but then suddenly the drives start disappearing in some of the slots. And by disappearing, I mean, sometimes there's drive 5. There's nothing in there. Asustor, like the NAS, can't see it. Then I swap it around and then drive 2 and then drive 5, and sometimes some of the drives just didn't show up and I was like, what is going on? I checked all of the drives on my PC and they all work, they all show up, no problem, they format all right, all drives are working fine, but for some reason the NAS didn't see it. But long story short, these drives and the NAS SATA controller or the SATA interface there, either both of them need an upgrade or firmware upgrade, or just the SSDs here, or just the NAS. We'll have to see that. But they did find out that there is some kind of incompatibility with this one, and it's so easy to miss. Because if we're looking at the Lockerstor 6 Gen 2 here, and the model number is as6706t, okay? So this is the NAS I have there. If you look at the compatibility list, if you click on there, I've got it already open over here. So if you scroll down all the way, there's Seagate, there's all sorts of different manufacturers of hard drives, SATA drives, and there's a big compatibility. But you can look at this, oh, look at that, ZN6096 sorted. It's in the list there. Let's plug it in, let's work. But if you look in here, then as you can see, this section is then the actual products that are compatible with this. There is no as6706t. There is 65, 6004U, 66, but not 67, as you can see. So the Lockerstor 6, the previous generation, is discontinued. There is no Lockerstor 6, there's only the Gen 2 here. As you can see, this is 67. So that's not compatible. But it will be compatible once we get it updated and working. But at this point in time, I've got something else in there. I'm running Seagate Iron Wolf NAS hard drives there. They're 4 terabytes inside each, and there's 6 of them. So I'm running them in RAID 5, which means that I will get 1 drive redundancy. So any one of these drives can fail, and then I still have all my data. I can swap it out, and then it will write the RAID kind of on the drives again, and then voila. I could go RAID 6, but then I'll lose 2 drives, but I'd probably want the capacity over that 2 drive redundancy. So now when it's all working, as you can see, I've got the NAS up and running here. If we go Storage Manager, you can see all of the 6 drives are in there. They're all working, and we've got these in there as well, the M.2 drives. If we go to the volume bit here, if you go Management, set up SSD caching. Read and write, okay? We've got 2 of the NVMEs in there. I understand that this might happen. We're gonna select both of these, 500 gigabytes. We're gonna press next, maximize. There we go, and we're gonna go finish. And then now those two NVMe drives in there as well will start to work as SSD caching for the hard drives, which will improve the performance depending how you're working on them, and the read and write speeds. If they're all over the place, this will help that. I've got the NAS plugged into my switch, which is a 2.5 gigabit switch, and then the NAS is in here, 2.5 gig, port there as well. And then the PC that's in here, that you can see in here, also has 2.5 gigabit Ethernet on the PC. So there's no bottlenecks in terms of the actual networking interfaces, but the actual drives are faster than the network interface, because 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, how you calculate that is 2.5 times 125, 312 megabytes per second read and write speeds, roughly maximum from that 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. I did run the Crystal Disk Mark speed test previously before actually doing this on that drive here, because I have mapped the drive here, Lockerstor 6 main, as you can see. This is one of those folders there. I've put the Crystal Disk Mark there and then test for speeds there as well. And when running the speed test, we can see that the read speed 292 megabytes per second and write speed 166 megabytes per second. So you can see data protection, faulty drives tolerated 1, and I've got all of these in there. So if we are looking at the volume there, in total I have 18 terabytes of storage. And if we are dropping a folder on, let's see how fast does it copy. Right now 160 megabytes per second, because it's the speed test that we did over there. Now let's see if I drop a few things at the same time. Let's see what will be the total. Roughly about the same, 160 something megabytes per second in total. About 80 plus 80, yeah, 160. The reason why we want to go with these SSDs is because the write speed for these will be much, much faster. So we could be writing our data, or when we are copying the data over to the NAS with RAID 5, it will be much, much faster read and write speeds because the single drive speed. Now these are very, very fast hard drives still. As you can see, 290 megabytes per second. We used to have just 100 megabytes per second, remember? They're getting fast, but it's not quite as good. If we are copying it the other way, so let's rename this to test copy. Okay, so if we go to the desktop and we're copying this one over, let's see how fast. As you can see, we're reading about 270 megabytes per second. I also want to show you a different speed test, or a little bit of a trick what you can do on the NAS, which I was really happy to figure out. So how this is connected over here is, I've got the NAS here, okay? I've got a switch from Asustor, the Asustor switch, 2.5 gig switch, if you haven't checked that one out yet before. Very, very affordable switch if you're looking for a 2.5 gig switch. And then I've got the router coming into one of the ports. Then two of the ports are going straight in the back of the NAS. And then two of the ports from the switch are connected to this over here. This is the Asus ProArt X670E test bench, and I'm running the 7950X, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 7950X CPU in there. But the main point is this, because this ProArt board has 2.5 gigabit Ethernet and 10 gigabit Ethernet, I'm going to show you what you can do here. Basically, what this is called is an SMB. The way you can get it up is two Ethernet ports from your PC to the switch or directly to the NAS, but you'll really need the switch because you need the IP addresses from your router. So router to one, two PCs and two NAS, and then check this speed out now. All you have to do is go to the services on your Asustor app there, okay? Services, enable SMB multi-channel, okay? Press apply, and then literally restart the NAS, which I have already done. By the way, I've also set up a little bit of different volumes on the NAS, because previously we tested the hard drives on the NAS, and these are not the Pro hard drives, and they're the slower hard drives, and that's why we're getting a little bit of a slower write speed and about 250, a little bit plus megabytes per second read speed. But just to show you that the NAS is capable so much more if you have faster drives, for example, then what I have done is, instead of the SSD caching that I had previously over there, I disconnected the SSD caching and I have set up another volume 2 drive here, okay? So these are the two SSDs that I have inside. They're RAID 0, so they're literally just kind of pulled together. There's no faulty drives tolerated there. It's all good, as you can see. ext4, 2 of them in there. And then now I've got the volume 2 also mapped on my PC here, which is this there. And then if we're gonna pull something from the local drive here, okay? For example, I'm gonna get the playback speed and the Canon C200 RAW, okay? I've got a 16 gigabyte file. Okay, let me pull one out so we can see if you just had one port connected. So now it's only 2.5 gigabit port connected, right? To the NAS, and then 2 of them to the NAS. So basically I could disconnect one from the NAS as well. It doesn't matter, but if I'm gonna pull that one there, the write speed is about 280 megabytes per second. And as you can see, now we're a little bit more limited to the 2.5 gig LAN kind of port, because the theoretical bandwidth of that one is now pretty much fully saturated. As you can see, 283 megabytes per second. But if you've got the SMB enabled and you're going to plug in the secondary port there, okay, secondary port is connected as well. Bear in mind, when you do that, you're going to have to restart the PC because sometimes it doesn't recognize the SMB, and in order to set it up, this is what you have to do here. Okay, that's connected. I'll just literally restart the PC. Same situation, PC is restarted. 2 of these are plugged in, and look at this now. Boom, 560 megabytes per second write speeds. So basically, as you can see, you can pretty much get 5 gigabits per second bandwidth or transfer speeds from these two 2.5 gigabit ports. And this is not a managed switch, okay? This is unmanaged switch, and this is pretty much as simple as plug and play, right? Plug 2 of these in, plug them 2 on the PC, tick the box, go for it, that's it. As you can see, you can get much faster than 2.5 gigabit port speeds through those 2.5 gigabit ports, if that makes sense. So if you've got faster drives in there, or like the SSDs in there, or you want to utilize the NVMEs as another volume in there instead of SSD caching and so on, then you can do that. By the way, if you're doing SSD caching on your NAS, what's recommended is to work in the SSD caching. Basically, it takes a little bit of a working in, not just instantly it working, in order to get the, you know, benefit of SSD caching, because it's going to figure out like where the things are on your hard drives and which files you're going to be using, and then it's going to store the, you know, cache kind of to the SSD's read and write speeds. So it needs a little bit of working in to do before you actually see the benefit there. But as you can see, it's one beast of a NAS. Now, is that speed fast enough to edit off the NAS? And I think if you do basic things, it's totally doable. Read speed roughly around 300 megabytes per second, something like that. But I wasn't quite happy with it, just because we'd make such a huge downgrade from, you know, the internal NVMEs that we'll be editing on. What we're going to be doing with this NAS, which I'm going to make a separate video about it, how to do it and why we're going to do it, and explain a little bit more why, how and why this is beneficial. But we're going to get this NAS to synchronize with a folder on our editing PC in the NVMe drive. So on the NVMe drive, that's, you know, super fast Gen4, 5,000 plus megabytes per second read and write speeds, but also the random read and writes will be very fast. So very, very fast storage. That part will be synced up with the NAS in real time, or depending after X amount of minutes. So whatever will be on that NVMe drive will be also on the NAS, and that NAS can also now sync the other way with a different PC. So for example, if I'm here and the editor is there, we can access the same files, but the NAS will be the syncing kind of center. One will be syncing one way and then one on the other way. So we can both access the same files, but we're not limited to that 2.5 gigabit Ethernet speeds. We are actually reading the actual files or programs from our local NVMe storage, which will be much faster. I'm going to explain it in another video, but I'm still happy to get that NAS to play with and a little bit get this storage kind of solution set up. If you want to pick up this NAS, all the hard drives in there, then check it out in the video description below. And there's exciting things coming, because there's a few upgrades that we're going to do for the NAS. There is a 10 gigabit Ethernet card that we can put in there, so we're not limited to 2.5 gigs. That's going to come up. And there's a few more very exciting NAS things coming from Asustor, so definitely stick to those videos. And if you haven't built yourself a creator PC yet as a creator and you're wondering what to do, which ones to get, then I have created the ultimate best bang for buck creator PC build guide. It's in the description of the videos, any videos, find it out there. There's a video for you, for your budget. You can configure it and get the best performance for your budget. Check it out in the video description below. Everything will be explained over there. Thanks guys for watching, and bye bye.